Kelly Davis, your host of the Untold Miracles podcast, and today I am so excited to interview the president and CEO of Children's Miracle Network Hospitals, Teri Nestel. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, Teri, I'm just so excited to talk to you because on this podcast, we talk about miracles, and you have dedicated most of your professional life to be fully committed to creating miracles in the life of sick kids. So before we start, I just want to thank you so much for everything that you've done for kids treated at Children's Miracle Network hospitals. And I'd also really like to know your definition of a miracle, because I think you have an interesting perspective, having worked with Children's Miracle Network hospitals since 1989.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Kelly. When I think about miracles, I really think about things that defy natural and scientific laws, something that we can't explain, something we can't see. And so when I think about that, I think that we have seen so many miracles at Children's Miracle Network because we can't explain, medicine doesn't explain it. And so I think that miracle is a very fitting word for our organization. When I think about the many, many kids that we have seen come through our hospitals over the years, it's amazing to me. And I just feel so privileged to be here, to have the opportunity to come to work every day and actually call this a job, because it's something I would do if I was wealthy and I didn't have to work for a living. I would still do this because I think it's so important.
Yeah, and I definitely echo what you say. This has always felt like just a passion, right? Versus a job. Like, we're so lucky that we get to come to work every day and really work with the most incredible kids. And I know you have a lot of stories, and I'll ask you about that later. But I want to start when you were a little girl. What were your dreams growing up? Did you have a dream to be a CEO of a very large children's charity?
No, I would say that, when I think back on my childhood dreams, I remember I wanted to be an astronaut because when I was 10 years old, that was when man landed on the moon in 1969. And I was just fascinated. I dreamed about, being in a rocket and leaving the earth and, walking on the moon. But I would say that only lasted a few months. That was when I was in third grade, I think. And then I decided I wanted to be a teacher. And by the time I got to junior high school, I decided I was fascinated by business and politics and all the things that were going on around me at the time during the 70s. And, I was really fueled by a very inspirational teacher when I was in ninth grade who taught me about American government. And I was fascinated by the whole world of politics. But sadly, at that time, I didn't see myself as a CEO because girls were supposed to grow up and be wives and mothers and homemakers. And so I didn't have that kind of a dream. But I thought, especially as I entered the work world, that I could be in charge of something, maybe not be CEO. I don't think I had those grand of ideas in mind, but that I could be helpful and deliver value to an organization.
Well, would you mind sharing with our listeners how you started working with Children's Miracle Network hospitals? You've had a very interesting journey with many roles and just opportunities to open, different programs. And so, yeah, I'd love for you to share more.
Sure. Well, I have to say that what brought me to fundraising initially was that I had two friends in Arkansas who had a baby that was born premature, and he spent almost 12 weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit. And really, despite the amazing care and the best care that was available at that time, his lungs were just too tiny, too weak, and he didn't make it. And we didn't have the kind of technology that's available today. And while it didn't happen to me, I was witness to maybe the most intense suffering that a human being can experience when my dear friends lost their tiny baby boy. And I would say that experience really changed the course of my career. I was really on a path to go make a lot of money and become famous. But I heard about this job at Arkansas Children's Hospital in the Development Community Relations Department, and I started working with individuals on major gift opportunities. And we were one of those first 22 hospitals who signed on to participate in the telethon in 1983. And I loved the opportunities to network and share ideas with other children's hospitals around the country. And so I spent about 6 years at Arkansas Children's Hospital, and then I joined CMN Hospitals in 1989 as a regional director, and I was kind of responsible for working with 28 hospitals across 10 states in the Southeast. We had a regional office in Cincinnati, Ohio, that I shared with 2 other regional directors who were over the Northeast and Midwest, and we spent most of our time on the road. And so eventually we closed the regional offices and just started working from home. And so I moved out to Washington, D.C. and worked in many different roles in the organization, mostly in the corporate fundraising area, managing relationships with initially with some of our regional corporate partners and a lot of retailers, like you may remember Eckerd Drug and Amico Oil, Publix Supermarket, Food Lion. I think I've worked with every partner that we've had over the years and just really learned what corporations want from charitable organizations and how they can really come together and make a difference for kids in their communities. So spent a lot of time on the corporate side. And then Mick Shannon approached me. I want to say it was around 2004, and asked me if I was interested in working with him on a secondary brand called Cure Kids Cancer. We really wanted to give our hospitals an opportunity to tell their story about the amazing work that was being done in research and care for kids with cancer. And so I worked on that initiative for about 3 years, and then Mick retired and we got a new CEO, and our new CEO's big initiative was international expansion. And that sounded really interesting to me because I've always loved travel. That's been kind of a desire since I was fairly young. I've always been curious about how other people in the world live. So anyway, so we had an opportunity to establish our operations over in the UK and Ireland. And so when Jim said we're gonna do that, who's interested in maybe moving over there for a couple of years, I raised my hand and said, pick me. And so I moved over to London, and wow, that was a really interesting experience of just going out and calling on hospitals and corporate partners and radio stations in a country that I really did not know a lot about. And probably the reason we were successful there was because I didn't know we shouldn't be. And, in hindsight, I think we would do things very differently if we decided to pursue international operations again. But, I loved really going over and sharing some of the experiences we've had here in the US of raising funds for children's hospitals with those hospitals, because it really made a difference for them. Even though their healthcare is nationalized, there are certain things that are not considered medically necessary. And so it was really satisfying to me to see that the funds we were able to raise over in the UK and Ireland were really making a difference for the kids there. So, and then the global financial crisis occurred, and I came back to the US in 2009. And Scott Burt was our CEO at that time, and he asked me to take on some new initiatives around long-term funding and corporate integrity. And he also asked me to look into culture, which, just seemed like a natural thing to me. And so then when John Lauck joined as CEO in 2011, he took time to meet with every single person on staff. And I've told this story to a lot of people, but I was so prepared. I had just been through a personal branding workshop
Mhm.
that really made me examine, what are my values and what do I stand for? What are the things that I bring uniquely that others don't? And so when I had my one-on-one with John, I shared with him, a lot of the skills that I thought would be valuable to see him in. I told him I was interested in strategy. I told him I was interested in human development. I had just recently finished a certification course in integral coachings. So I was very interested in what makes people tick and um, how we become leaders. For some it's innate, you have natural leadership abilities, and for others of us we have to learn leadership skills, and they are learnable. I think that many people think you have it or you don't, but that's not true. I think some people are better at it than others, but I think it is absolutely uh, a possibility to learn how to be a good leader. And so as I kind of worked with John and tried to figure out where my place was in the organization, I tried to share with him what values I thought I could bring to the organization. And he heard me, put me in charge of strategy. And for 6 months, I just couldn't catch my breath. I was so excited to get up and come to work every day and really to engage people from all over the organization in conversations about what is it that's holding us back, and what does the future look like to you, and how do we continue to make this organization grow and be a benefit in the world to the kids who need us. And so after working on that for about 6 months, John invited me to join his executive team as the chief administrative officer. And I had the opportunity to learn about really the professional services side of our organization, and led the finance and accounting team, legal, human resources, and IT. All areas that I really didn't know a lot about, but I'll tell you that one of the things that I think has really served me well across my career has been the fact that if I don't know something, I'm going to dig in and learn. I'm going to go talk to people who know about what I don't know, or I'm going to take courses. I'm going to understand or webinars. There are a lot of different ways that you can learn, but I love to learn. And so I think, again, that's one of the things that has also served me well across my career. And so, and then earlier this year, that we lost John in a tragic accident, and the board asked me to step in as the interim CEO, and I agreed to step in while they were conducting a search for a permanent one. And then in September, they came back and asked me to serve the organization as the president and CEO. And so I have to say that when I joined Children's Miracle Network, my plan was to stay a minimum of 3 years, but a maximum of 5, because I thought this is going to be so much fun. But then I want to go back and really run a hospital foundation. But now I'm on my, 6th 5-year plan, because there has always been something really interesting and challenging and fun working for Children's Miracle Network hospitals. And so here I am. Likely I will retire in this position, and I have considered it such a privilege to be here throughout my entire career.
Well, I think it's just amazing the impact that you've had on the organization for so many years. And would you mind sharing just one of your most memorable experiences with the organization, and possibly a child that you've met that's really impacted you?
Yeah, so I would say that maybe one of the most memorable experiences would have been when I was in London. We identified kids from the UK and from Ireland who were going to be our champion families. And I got particularly close to one child, Grace Hardy, and her family, Dina and Gervais, who Grace was 4 years old, and she was just the most adorable little girl with this brown curly hair and just a smile that would just take you away. But I worked with a production crew, and we shot her story in her home, and just getting to know her very, very intimately. You know what it's like to work with these families. And so we flew together from London to Orlando, and she had an opportunity to be one of the featured families on the main stage at Celebration that year. And so at the end of the event, I just have to say that when she walked out on stage and she was just waving and smiling in her little Cinderella costume, princess costume, she was just so adorable, and it just literally brought tears to my eyes. But then the connection to that was when we got back to Gatwick, London Gatwick Airport, and she and her family were changing planes, and we were saying our goodbyes. Her mother, Dina, grabbed me and gave me this just really big hug and said, "I just have to thank you for this experience in my family's life." That it was, normally when we are the center of attention, it's because of things that are not good. That Grace is in an emergency situation and being resuscitated. She told me that Grace had been resuscitated 11 times in her 4 years, and that it was such an amazing experience for her family to be on stage and to be the center of attention for good things, representing their hospital and the amazing things that our children's hospitals do. And I think what made that experience so memorable was that Dina started to cry, and then I started to cry, and I could not stop crying. Even after I said goodbye and sent them to meet their connecting flight, I'm going through customs with these tears rolling down my face, and just and even when I got in the taxi to go home, I was still crying. The taxi driver thought something horrible had happened to me, but I was just, after 20 hours of travel, once the waterworks start, you can't stop. But that was a very meaningful experience to me, just from the perspective that I was able to help that family see a different perspective of their child's illness. And that was really meaningful to me. But I did say to her, and I know it's not just me, there's a whole team behind the celebration event that we do, and that it's the work of all of us that make it possible for those families to be able to celebrate overcoming incredible challenges and to triumph over illness. And so that was one that I think just really stands out for me.
Oh, I appreciate you sharing that. It truly it reminds us all just how lucky and fortunate we are to even get to meet these kids, to know them and see how their futures are impacted by the treatment that they receive at our children's hospitals. But I want to talk about your leadership through this pandemic. We are going through an unprecedented time. This pandemic has significantly impacted our children's hospitals and our fundraising. And I just want to know how you've been able to rise to this challenge of leading our company through these really challenging times, and what advice you would have for other corporations that are really going through it, and other nonprofits.
Well, Kelly, I won't lie, it has been challenging, but I also feel like I have been so blessed to be surrounded by amazing people like our board of trustees. I felt like at any time during this pandemic that I had 26 people who were behind me, supporting me, that I could reach out to at any time and ask for advice. And I got plenty of it, I'll say. And then I would also say that what made it possible was really the fact that we have such an amazing executive team, a senior leadership team that is just so talented, and a staff that is so committed to this cause that I don't think it was necessarily me, but that we have just such an amazing team who wanted to make sure that things kept moving forward. There were things going on that I wasn't even aware of until later on, where people were just jumping in and doing what needed to be done during this pandemic. It created such an interesting environment for all of us, because none of us really had any guidebook on what should we do now. And so a lot of it was just instinct and experience over the years of knowing that, okay, it's going to be important for us to build solid relationships with our partners while we're going through this pandemic, because they're going through a terrible experience too. And so we want to be there to support them and to ensure that they know that we are here for them regardless of what happens, because many of them, their businesses struggled, and they were unable to really fulfill the commitments they had made with regard to fundraising. But there were others who were at the opposite end. And so some really picked up the slack and carried it for others. And we're getting through this together. So I would say it's not just me, but the many amazing people that are part of this organization. And you, I mean, continuing to tell stories about the amazing kids that are being cared for at our children's hospitals is an incredible benefit.
Well, speaking of leadership, I would love to know if there have been any challenges that you faced being a female in leadership, and what advice would you give to young girls who aspire to be future CEOs?
That's a great question. So I think maybe one of the most frustrating things for me has been not being taken seriously. I'm kind of small in stature, you know, I'm not quite 5'4", and I have often felt that I'm just not being taken seriously, or I am being pigeonholed or stereotyped if I'm the only woman in the room being asked to take notes. And I'm like, no, I am not an administrative assistant. I'm a leader here, and so take your own notes. And so I would just say that knowing, I think one of the things that I can say as a female leader is that it's important to know your value. And as I have moved through the ranks of the organization, just having faith in myself and the skills that I bring to the organization, and being willing to stand up for myself and for what I believe in and the values that I think I can bring. Yeah, I would just say that it's really important for people, for young women particularly, to really examine what skills, what experience, what unique talents you have, and know how to articulate the value of those to an organization. And so that's I guess the best advice I could give is know yourself, be able to sell what you are good at to the organization, and don't accept less. Right? If an organization is not going to value what you have to bring, then move on. We live in a big world, and there are lots of opportunities out there, and so don't wallow in people not recognizing you. Go out and do something about it. If you don't feel that you have the qualifications to do something, go get those qualifications, because we're all very capable of learning until we take our very last breath. And so don't give up on yourself and think that you can't, because you can. And as a man thinketh, so is he, right? So if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Well, I love that. That's so empowering for us all. And as part of your leadership, you taught a really incredible course to all the employees at Children's Miracle Network Hospitals about how to have critical conversations. And I think that's such a key to success in leadership. And I would just love for you to share like the most beneficial skill that you have learned in teaching that.
So I would say the most beneficial thing to me was learning that you have to engage. Don't be afraid to enter into a conversation, even if it is high stakes. And I think the two most important things that have to be present in any crucial conversation is respect and caring. You can fumble the words. You can say not say whatever it is that you're trying to say perfectly. But if it's clear that you hold the other person with respect and that you care about what they want, you can talk about just about anything. But you have to have the courage and the faith in others to take the first step and start the conversation. You may not be successful in your first attempt, but keep trying. I would just say it's about engaging in that conversation. I can't tell you how many relationships have been enriched by my willingness to step in and say, hey, what's going on here? Let's stop talking about this business topic and let's talk about our relationship and what's happening, and help me understand what you're thinking, because oftentimes you can uncover misunderstandings that people have about each other. We're making up stories about each other all day long, and so sometimes our stories are not true. And it is only when you are willing to step into those conversations and actually ask, hey, what's going on here? What is it that you think about me that is making you behave in that way? And then you can start to clear up those misunderstandings.
That's such powerful advice. I think it's easier, said than done. But I think if we're willing to step into that vulnerability,
I agree.
That really is where we're going to see magic happen in our lives. I would love to know what your vision is for our organization moving forward, especially through the pandemic and beyond, and what you're hopeful about.
So we have such enormous opportunities to change the future. As you mentioned, we are in this pandemic and we're in a new environment and for fundraising and really historically, Children's Miracle Network Hospitals has been a leader in pioneering new ways to raise funds to support our children's hospitals. When I think back, we were the first to really see a telethon as a way of sharing positive and uplifting stories about kids, not just surviving, but triumphing over major illness and injury. And we were among the first to engage in cause-related marketing back in the early 80s. We found the formula that made Radiothon take off across the country like wildfire, if you remember. And I would also say we pioneered the paper icon program, and then everyone copied us after that. Everybody has a paper icon program now. And the other thing is the Extra Life, more recently, when I think about the Extra Life campaign and how that has really taken off in the cause gaming space. And again, people followed us. So I'm confident in our staff and in our network that that spirit of innovation is going to discover new ways to raise funds during this pandemic that are really going to lift healthcare for kids in our country. And so I think about it from that perspective. I also think about our future. Really, I'm envisioning an organization that inspires leaders throughout our network. Whether you have a leadership position or you just see something that needs to be changed or improved. I am really interested in creating a leadership learning community within CMNH so that we can change kids' health. And in doing so, we change the future. And I know Sally would be proud of me now.
Well, can you tell me what you've enjoyed most about being the president and CEO?
Oh, well, I will say that it has been such a joy to see the responses of our staff and even of our leaders in the organization, of how so many people have come forward with ideas about how we start to move forward during this pandemic, or what we do to support our hospitals and our partners during this pandemic. And so I think just seeing the talent across our organization bubbling up to make a difference has been one of the things that I've enjoyed the most.
Right. I love that. Well, I have a couple quick fire questions for you before we end.
All right.
What is your favorite food?
Chocolate, without a doubt.
What kind of chocolate is your favorite?
Oh, I don't discern beyond that. I love it all, right?
I know, that's me. I'm like chocolate is everything to me.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, favorite hobby.
Oh, anything that has to do with being outdoors, walking my dogs, boating, gardening, anything that gets me outside.
Favorite vacation spot.
Um, I'd have to say Antarctica.
Mm.
And it was just so amazing to be out in such a remote location and to be so close to the marine life there. We were so close to some humpback whales that I could hear them breathing. I mean, literally, they were within 12 feet of me, and also just witnessing nature happening. There was a pod of orca whales that were chasing a penguin, and it was almost surreal to see how this little penguin was able to just shoot out of the water 6 or 8 feet and defy these orca whales. And so I would just say Antarctica was the most amazing experience of my life.
Okay, favorite book.
Oh, that would be hard. There are a lot. I would say recently I read White Fragility. About social change, and that made a huge impact on me. I think I'm still kind of reeling from what I learned in that book. But there are a ton of others. You mentioned Crucial Conversations earlier. That's one that has certainly changed my life. I would also say Primal Leadership is one that if you are trying to learn about leadership, it really is a great base for what does it mean to be a resonant leader. And so that would be one. And then I would say there are a couple of others, if I can just jump in. Thank You for Being Late by Thomas Friedman. I am all about change and renewal, and Thomas Friedman's book really there's a chapter in there about technology and how things converged in 2007 and how it's changing the world. And so I would just say that was a great one for me. And one other I would mention is Philanthropy in a Flat World, about how technology has changed things and what it means to us in terms of raising funds, that we're competing with people all over the world now, not just the people in our own communities. So yeah, I could go on. I love to read.
I look at your background and I'm like, yeah, it would be really hard to pick a favorite book.
Yeah.
You have so many. All right. I would love to know the biggest miracle that has ever happened in your life.
I was never able to have children. And so I have two that I've adopted. And so I would say for me, that was huge. I love being their mom. It has changed my life. And now I have grandkids. So I would say they're the second biggest miracle. But, if you really start to think about miracles, the fact that you and I are sitting here talking to each other is kind of a miracle. We still don't understand. We understand the mechanics of life, but I don't know that we really understand the spark of life, where it really comes from. And so, yeah, I'm not sure I have a really great story for you around my biggest miracle. They're all simple.
I love that. I think, in interviewing a lot of different guests, I think the first thing that they say is like their kids, right? And I think in this job, like I don't have any children, but I feel like God had a much bigger dream for me than I had for myself. Instead of the 4 kids that I always wanted, I got hundreds of kids. And and I really think that it truly is a miracle that you have those children and those grandkids in your life, because that's truly so. Well, the last question that I asked to all of our guests is, if there were 3 miracles that you could create in the world today, what would that look like for you?
So I would love to eliminate sickness and disease. Ultimately, I would love to put all of our children's hospitals out of business, or maybe to change the way they are perceiving their role in the world. So that would be one thing. My holy discontent is seeing innocent kids suffering. That's so I would just love to eliminate that. And I would also say that if I could create a miracle right now, it would be to create some compromise in politics. Right? It is so frustrating to me that we seem to have lost the ability to have civil discourse anymore, and that everyone is so polarized in their own beliefs instead of trying to come together to find the things that we have in common instead of the things that we have that instead of our differences. I think it's important to celebrate differences, but I also think that to be a really healthy democracy, we need to be able to compromise. And so yeah, that would be, I think that would take a miracle right now with the polarization in our country. But, and yeah, I think that's all I have for you, Kelly. I can't think of a third.
That's fine. Well, I forgot I wanted to ask you one last question before we close. We all loved working with John Lauck, and you worked very closely with him for his 9 years with the organization. And I would love for you to share the biggest impact that he made in your life.
Wow. Okay. So I guess I would start with the fact that one of the experiences I had with John when he first came to Children's Miracle Network was that he actually took the time to meet with every single person on staff. We all had our chance to go in and tell him who we are, what are we doing here, and is there anything that we're not able to do, or what the last question was around, are we utilizing all your skills and talents? And so I came away from that conversation with John feeling seen and heard. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts that as human beings we can give one another, is to actually listen carefully and demonstrate that you've heard what the other person has said. And that was just a start. I will tell you that John had my number. He understood when it was time to give me a new project, right? So strategy was the first thing he gave me the opportunity to work on. And I basically went in and asked for it because I love strategy. My whole life, I've really engaged in activities that were really strategy based. My brother taught me how to play chess when I was 4 years old. And, of course, I had a 4-year-old understanding of chess, but over the years, my skills improved, and I really started to see other places in my life where strategy had shown up. And so when I told John Lauck about that, he heard me, and he responded by giving me an opportunity to work on strategy for the organization. And I would say that the other thing that he gave me the opportunity to work on was the organization redesign, because I had just such a hunger, a desire to help us get better as an organization, to smooth out those conflicts where things were really kind of colliding and not really being able to move forward. He really taught me how to lead and to be a calm, steady presence. I think John really prepared me for this role that I'm in right now. He demonstrated it. He modeled a calm, steady presence in many situations where we were having conflicts across the network, or even internally. The behavior that I saw from him was to always listen carefully, to hear both sides of the story, and then to make decisions based on a set of values. And I saw John repeatedly make decisions that he thought were the right thing to do based on the things that he knew and cared about. And so I don't know, I guess those would be some of the things, some of the ways in which he influenced me over the years.
I appreciate you sharing that. He truly impacted us all, and it's just amazing that we have a leader today that is been prepared. You've been prepared for this since you started in like 1983 working with our children's hospital in Arkansas. And it's really amazing to see you step into this role, especially during these times. And we're just so grateful for you and the miracles that you are continuing to create in the world, especially for the 10 million kids that we treat each year at our 170 children's hospital. So I just want to say thank you and acknowledge you for truly the miracles you're creating.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly. I still consider it a privilege to get up and come to work every day. I feel like, I'm able to make a difference here. And I hope that what you see is modeling the kind of leadership I learned from John Lauck.
I love that. Well, thank you for your time today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day and appreciate the organization giving us the day off to be able to vote.
You bet. Hey, Kelly. Thank you for the great job you're doing on this podcast. I really appreciate the work that you do as well.
Well, thank you. All right. Well, have a great day. Thanks, Teri.
Okay. Take care. Bye.